Happy New Year. Have you seen the headlines? Democrats in Biden's home state are leaving for the Republican Party in droves, the voter data shows. Well, when the dead in Pennsylvania rise up and go from Democrat to Republican to vote, it'll truly be a miracle. Welcome to Grounded, the place to hear the salty truth. I'm your host, Scott Cates, coming to you live from the Northeast Georgia mountains and the tiny town of Tiger. Welcome to year 2 of the podcast. Those of you that listened last year, I want to thank you so much for listening. The thousands of you that have listened to this podcast, I seriously appreciate the fact that you afford your time to listen to this. You're going to see it's going to say season 2. That's actually year 2. We're in episode 1. And today I'm going to welcome you to what I'm going to call the 3-hour tour. There'll be a 3-hour tour. It's New Year's Day. So today, instead of it being about 40 minutes or so, we're going to try to go 3 parts today. And each part, we'll just call it the 3-hour tour. So in hour 1, we're going to talk about America in general, the adults in America, the things that are going on, the things that are in the headlines. I spent about 3 weeks actually taking some time down through the holidays. Everyone had so much going on, and so did I. So it just took a little bit of time out from doing that. So at the close of this first episode today, right in a few minutes to go into the second hour, I'll tell you how to do that. So that you can look into that. But welcome back after a few weeks down. A lot of things have happened. One of the things in the headlines that I was just reading earlier is the fact that the Democrats in Biden's home state are leaving for the Republican Party in droves. It's not just in that state. There are many states, actually, that people are switching from Democrat to Republican. And the reason for this that is given, it says many Pennsylvania voters are not happy with Bidenomics. And that is happening nationwide. I read an article that talked about the fact that there was a TikTok user on a video, and that TikTok video, I'm not a TikToker, but anyway, during that TikTok video, it showed how much the increase of a hamburger had become under Biden's administration. And so that seemed to have gone viral, and just something simple like that. But anyway, it's caused sort of a rampant move from Democrats switching over to the Republican Party. Boy, I'm telling you, that's not good news necessarily for their administration. But I also saw at the same time just the things that had, as we went through 2023, the things that we were leaving behind. And many responses that were given by Joe Biden, but then after that, the Kamala Harris responses and the emptiness of the phrases of the words were unbelievable. Literally nothing said, every 3 words. And I'm thinking to myself as I look at that, I thought, wow, that's a learned trait to be able to say nothing in that many words. And so 2023, we simply leave behind the entire word salad of 2023 that had nothing behind it anywhere in that party, and that is the truth. I go now looking at an article that says our national bankruptcy. This is a great article. It says our national bankruptcy is really moral, not just economic, but it's moral, political, and economic. And this article is really good. And he says the fundamental underlying cause of our catastrophic debt is the decay of morality. And he goes on and he says, over the decades, the traditional American respect for the sanctity of private property has eroded and diminished. And under the influence of progressive and socialist ideas and sophistries, the American people came to believe that they were entitled to receive benefits that others could be made to pay for. He begins to talk about the decline of this. He talks about the fact that there's that pressure, the social programs, the programs of that the government is funding for the transgenderism, all of these things. We are in a moral bankruptcy. And because of the moral bankruptcy, and there's no guidelines for morality, that has created a political bankruptcy, and it is moving at an alarming rate. We are currently $34 trillion in debt as we leave 2023, moving into 2024, and spending like we're on fire to do more because of the things. And what we're spending this money on are the things that are lacking in morality, and that is the core of our issues. There is no central truth. That's a big deal. And so with that coming on, we see that happening. We see the fact that the American debt continues to rise. The debt between people this year, actually your personal debt has risen up this year. Many people's has, in an effort to sort of just stay alive during a time where it's cost much more to live than it did 4 years ago. There's no doubt about that. Plus, we get into an election year. Now, in the election year that we're getting into, it's kind of interesting to me because the same old promises will be made, the same old rhetoric you'll hear. You keep hearing the same old rhetoric from the same old people about the same old thing. Many promises will be made that will never be kept. And the intention, and in that article, it also says, talks about the fact that, in a sense, what happens is that the party that wants to win then promises to people who either aren't working or they promise, we'll pay for this for you, like the student loan bailout and all of that. We'll pay for this for you if you'll vote for us. It's essentially buying votes with federal money. And there's something really desperately wrong with that. You can't continue in that process. We just can't. And so there it is. There's not a central morality, and because of that, the decline in morality has created a national debt, and it just has, and it continues to do so. And votes are purchased with federal money or even state money, and sometimes based on the same programs. So wanted to just kind of touch base on that today. So we see that morality is needed. And I'm going to talk in hour one here, I'm talking about these things that we're seeing. Hour two, I want to talk to you about the pursuit in children's lives and all of the things that are, I have just a flood of articles that are on that and how to make a difference in their lives and why this is important. I also want to talk to you about the fact that by hour three, I really want to talk to you about how do we combat all of this? What is it that we actually do? Why traditions are actually important? We'll get into that in hour three. This was an article that I picked up as well. I'll get to this in just a second. Let me go to the next first. This one is about I was riding around in my 1950 Ford the other day. Which, by the way, there's nothing on the 1954 that actually isn't even close to environmentally friendly. It roars like crazy. It's loud. It's fun to drive. It's quick. It's fast. It's probably not good for the environment, but it's good for my soul. I'm just saying. It's riding around in that car, listening to the old music of that era for just a few moments. And I wasn't born in that era. I wasn't. It's a 1950 Ford, 74 years old this year, this car I'm driving around. But there's a nostalgic feel. Does it have power brakes? No. Does it have power steering? No. It's got a gigantic steering wheel that if you don't have enough air in the tires, you're not turning a corner easily. And to park it, that's a job. Now, you get quite the workout driving that car. There's no doubt about it. But I pulled up in the local racetrack to fill it up with fuel, and a man drove up behind me in his little Honda SUV, and he just stepped out of his car, and he walked around my car, and he said, "I'll trade you even right now. I'll trade you even for my Honda." I said, "What?" And he said, "I'm serious." He said, "I really am serious." He said, I always wanted one of these cars. And I said, No, I don't think so. I've owned this car now for about 10 years, and I think maybe that morning I might have considered that, but there was such a nostalgic feel and a reminder of what America once was and what we truly cared about. Not because I'm blowing carbon smoke down the road. That's not the case. Just because it reminded me. The songs that were playing, "Since I Don't Have You," what a sweet song from that area. I don't have plans and schemes. I don't have hopes and dreams. I don't have anything since I don't have you. What a sweet, it's a sweet song. All of the songs about love are precious, and they really are of that area. Some of the sweet songs about love, so precious from that era, reminding me that love between a man and a woman is just incredible. Also, at the same time, while I'm driving down the road here, I'm thinking about the fact that I don't have any GPS in this car. I don't have anything remotely digital looking at all, in this car, and how peaceful that actually is. I also don't have any air conditioning. Got heat, but no air conditioning, so got the window rolled down. Little green visor up above the top of that car that sort of is supposed to have been the Vista view is what it was, the visor of the day, and it was supposed to have stopped the sunlight from necessarily coming in the front window, and I just thought it was cool, so I have it on there. But it just reminds me of an innocence. And for just a half a second, living in the tiny town of Tiger in extreme northeast Georgia in the mountains, I'm reminded that there's just a taste of that America still left. Just a taste of it. And as I was driving down the road, I was thinking to myself, to be in this moment and to literally be thinking about this, what a blessing it is to be where I am. And it is. I began to think about our nation and some things that were coming. Why am I saying all of this? Because the next article I'm looking at it says Americans aren't buying into the government's electric vehicle revolution. And they're not. There are 3,882 car dealers that have said, forget it. We're not going to carry these. We have it's amazing. I don't know if you know this, but $24 billion has been committed for public charging infrastructure. And folks, people don't want it. They just don't. As a matter of fact, when it comes to electric vehicles, the statistic is that usually 9 months after an electric vehicle has been purchased, people are going back to their gas. There are lots that have cars that are 3 or 4 years old. They can't get rid of them. They're trying to sell them in other places. Americans aren't buying into it. They don't want to buy into it. And the more incentive that the government, speaking of bankruptcy, the more incentive that the government pushes on the American people to do this, the worse it gets. And we know the power grid can't handle it. No one wants to be stuck literally reading War and Peace or whatever, and you're trying to charge for 90 minutes to go 100 miles. And that's if it's not cold outside. No one wants to do that. Of course they don't. But probably the biggest issue is nobody wants the government to push anything on them, no matter what. It's why so many people were reluctant to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Speaking of that, let's talk about that for a minute, because I am seeing this incredible movement of people that are ready to put the whole idea of that, not that that's not been coming, but in 2024, the whole idea of what we've been living through for the last 4 years or whatever, because March 16th of this up and coming year will be 4 years ago that we were, literally shut down. There are so many people that want that behind them. I had a 4-page article I was reading about how there was none of that was even remotely close to real when it happened. What was this a test run for? All of that. And it wasn't conspiracy. This is a legit article on this. And the more and more people find that out, the less likely they are to trust anything, which is why people aren't wanting to watch debates and they're not wanting to turn to government. They're not wanting to do any of that. They're not. Because they put their trust in so many different things that to now they're looking for something that's substantial. The word of 2023. The word of 2023. Authentic, genuine. This is the word, genuine, authentic. That's the number one researched word of 2023. People want genuine and authentic, which means they want truth. Well, go figure. Moving on, a new type of dementia plagues America. And this article goes on to talk about the fact that it's estimated that at least 7 million people older than the age of 65 actually have dementia. So that means that by the end of the decade, he's talking about the fact that even more than 9 million people, that will increase. But the age is actually going to back off. And he talks about the fact that if it continues at the present state that we're in, it's going to double. Not only that, there'll be the fact that the age will be 40 and up instead of 65 and up at this point. There's a new type of dementia, and it's affecting people much younger than the age of 40. It's called digital dementia, and millions of unsuspecting young Americans are at risk of this. It's a major health concern. Digital dementia occurs when one part of the brain is overstimulated and another part of the brain is understimulated. It comes from you mindlessly using digital devices where the frontal lobe, which is responsible for the higher level of executive functions, gets little, if any, use. Meanwhile, the occipital lobe, the visual processor located at the back of the brain, is bombarded constantly with sensory input. So slouched over and spaced out, people both young and old start abusing their brains day in and day out. Preteens and teens are particularly at risk for two reasons. Americans 8 to 12-year-olds spend an average of 4.7 hours a day scrolling their lives away, and that's 70 days out of the year. The prefrontal cortex of the brain, the part that's responsible for planning and decision-making, it actually doesn't fully develop until the age of 25. So from 8 to 12 years old, it's sort of stunting the growth of that ability. Now, we're going to talk about that as well in just a minute. I'm going to get into children and talking about, though, this new type of dementia is coming. I've got an article that talks about the American classroom, the panic that's going on. We'll talk about some of that. I wanted to talk about this new dementia for just a second because it's basically about smartphone addiction, and it's really beginning to strike at the lives of people that are 40 and up, and even a little younger than that, because this is what they've been raised on or grown up in now. It's truly been the case for decades. IQ is declining rapidly in the West because of entertainment and literally this development that we're talking about here. And so that's where we are. This is a big deal. It's a big deal for a lot of reasons. I just ended up going into, and I've done this really since I was about, I would say about 14 years old. I started at 14 years old going to places that care for older Americans. People used to call old folks' homes senior adult communities. I would go and minister to senior adult communities. I've been doing that since I was about 14 years old. I would go in and I would sing. And then from about probably 18 to 20 years old forward, I did it every year, taking a guitar, going in, learning Christmas carols. And so for the last number of years, 35 years, 40 years, whatever, I have been 35 years, 30 years, I have been going every year pretty much caroling and going in ministering to our senior adult homes. And I've seen the same things each year as I've gone in. But it struck me this year more than I think any other year. I went into a place, and as I had gone into this place, I'd taken a group of people with me. We walked in the door, and the first thing that was said to me, someone said, "Oh my goodness, you changed guitars." And I actually had taken a different guitar this year than I had taken in the years past. And I said, I did change out. I changed guitars, and I couldn't believe they remembered that I had changed guitars because I only see them once a year. And so that struck me. And then a little lady came out of one of her rooms, and she looked at me and she said, "You're back." And I hadn't seen her in a year. And I thought, my goodness, She followed us around, and she just spent time following us around. And we went into an area of ambulatory care. And when we went into that area of ambulatory care where people had severe dementia and their minds were lost, basically, I began to sing Christmas songs. And then all of a sudden, I began to sing the lullabies. Away in a Manger, Silent Night. And as I did, they began to sing. Tears began to come to their eyes. And all of a sudden, that music in that moment transported them to a place where they came around in that moment. I was amazed, really. And to be honest with you, the one thing I was in one of the places, everyone was gathered in one room. And when we were gathered in one room, I began to ask them, where are you from? And someone said, I'm from Pennsylvania. I'm from New York. I'm from all over the United States. It was amazing. I'm from Delray Beach, Florida. And I began to talk to them about being in some of the places where they were. And it struck me. The one thing that they did know, and the one thing that they were raised up knowing in the United States of America was they knew the Christmas songs. Well, I also work with teenagers as well. As I work with teenagers, one of the things I've realized, I work with children and teenagers. On Wednesdays, I work with children and teenagers. And one of the things that always shocks me each Christmas is the fact that kids don't know the Christmas songs. They don't know Away in a Manger or Silent Night, especially not O Little Town of Bethlehem. And I began to think there in just that moment, I thought, my goodness, as I was watching, as we were in the room and we were singing those carols and those senior adults were singing to the top of their lungs, I began to think, what will they have in common? They have all of this in common. What will those students that I've been working with that are small children and teenagers who don't know these songs, what will they have in common when they arrive here? What will be the traditions that Americans actually do have in common? And I began to ask questions about that actually in places I went after I went caroling. And people were telling me, well, we learned those songs when we were in Sunday school. We learned those songs when we were in church, when we were kids. We learned those songs in children's music and choir programs. We learned those songs, folks. Those songs are under attack, and they are. And it's important that you understand that. As I'm looking through my articles at this point, tradition, the new dementia that's plaguing America right now is the fact that we're not engaged. But even amongst dementia patients, basically, is one of the things I'm telling you right now is the fact that the tradition of those songs carried through, that they still had that in common. There's an attack literally on Christmas music. Right at this moment, I'm looking at an article that says, Carry On Caroling. Why bizarre warnings about Christmas customs should be ignored. And it goes back, and he covers in this article the headlines beginning actually back in 2017, CBS News, the story began, Christmas music may take a mental toll. Psychologists say within days, a Fox News report echoed, Christmas music is bad for your mental health. The same irrational warnings have been repeated year after year. In 2019, a Fox 32 Chicago headline read, Christmas music can negatively impact your mental health. And it's not talking about every type of Christmas music. It is actually talking about the stuff that is related to Christianity. Secular progressives have sought to purge Christianity from public spaces for decades, but they're now seeking to purge that from music. And this is where these headlines are coming from. But by mid-December of 2021 and by January of 2022, the suggestion is maybe we should get back to the traditions of this. Wait a minute, we're going to change our minds. We are going to change our minds because we are seeing the toll that it's taken on the nation and our people of our nation. We have nothing in common. And so I read you now a different article which says it's a time for carols, the importance of learning the songs of Christmas. And it says this, carols contain great truths, truths of hope, love, and joy. And that's something that's hard to find in an age where truth is viewed as relative. This is important. Yes, these songs are filled with that. I know, we're New Year. I'm talking about Christmas carols. I'm talking about traditions, and I'm going to talk in the third hour a little bit more about those traditions. I'm just bringing this up now so that you can understand. We're in a place right now, we're in a situation right at this second where there are some things that we are going to need to do to combat some of the effects of the things that are happening. The digital dementia that is coming on, there's a reason for it. By the time I get to the third hour, you'll begin to see in the third hour the fact that the lack of gratitude, because of the fact that you're satisfied in everything that you see, or basically there's not enough downtime for that. You'll also see that by the lack of boredom in children's lives, quote unquote boredom at this point, because they're literally being stimulated 24/7, it is creating some things happening in their lives unlike we've ever seen. This is what we're moving into for 2024. Finally, the departure of leaving the past in the past. Never before in my life have I ever seen anything quite like right now, where people are wanting to leave the past in the past. I think that literal disgust over the feeling of what happened during the pandemic has finally taken its final toll. And when you add on top of that all of this moral decay, by the way, there is a move kind of leaning back toward morality in some ways because people are like, let's put the brakes on. There are parents that are actually going to the point of they're saying, nope, you're not getting a smartphone. You're not putting that in your hand. We don't want you to be involved in that. And I'll tell you about that too in just a few minutes. All of these things are happening. All of these things are taking their toll on the current generation for those of us who are still alive. And they leave a longing. Why am I bringing all of these things up? Well, I started this podcast today, this first hour of this podcast, in the fact that people are switching in Biden's home state from Democrat to Republican for a reason. Not anchored to anything. Not anchored to anything. If you look at the word liberal, and that's what you look at, I'm a card-carrying liberal. People will say that. The word liberal is not anchored to anything. No truth, no set of rules, no nothing. Just liberal to go do whatever you want, whenever you want, at any point in time you want. And if you look at the word conservative, which is what most Republicans would say they would be, you look at liberals, and I know you hear progressives, and that's in the middle. So I have some rules, but maybe I don't live by them all, whatever. But if you look at the word liberal, there are no rules. You can just go do whatever you want at any time you want, and there are no consequences for any of that because you never had any rules or no grounding truth in the first place. But there's a longing now and a searching for genuine and authentic. And it's a deep longing. And right now people are switching to the Republican Party, looking to conservatives for an anchor because they see a nation that is adrift. And it's departed from morality and truth, coming back to the Bible in ways maybe we've never seen. Boy, I'm going to tell you something about Sunday morning. As I stood in a worship service on Sunday morning, we began to sing praises on Sunday morning, Christmas Eve, Sunday morning. There was no Sunday school, just a Christmas Eve service. And we began to just sort of play a few songs before the service was going to begin. And when we broke into a song of praise, there was not a Christmas song, but a song of praise. People began to come to their feet one by one, and a spontaneous service of praise and the worshiping of God took place, unlike I have seen yet. I've been watching this curve and this turn for the last 3 to 4 months, and this excitement for Jesus that is incredible happening. And it is. The core of what I'm talking to you about today is found in Psalm 63. Oh God, you are my God. And there are key verses in this. My soul thirsts for you, my flesh longs for you. And it says, in a dry and thirsty land. I search for that word thirst. What does it mean? It doesn't mean that I'm just, at this point, I want a water or I want to go drink a soda or whatever. It's not like that. When I look at the word thirst, it's not something you can make yourself do. You can't make yourself be thirsty. You can't. Thirst is a hunger, a hunger that needs to be literally quenched. And folks, right now, there's a hunger in the United States of America. There's a hunger. There's a thirst because we are in a dry and thirsty land where for the longest time, it wasn't that necessarily there was no water, but the truth is, to be honest with you, to find the genuine water and the genuine truth today, it is difficult because much of it is watered down. Much of it isn't literally something you can hold on to. Much of it is not considered truth because it's not based on the things that have been handed down. It's based on quote unquote new ideas. It's based on quote anything that might hook people to get them in the door. Folks, listen to me. Jesus said, if I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto myself. And what I do know is that there is a satisfying, there is a hunger, back up, there's a hunger for God in a way that I've yet to see in my lifetime, I think. There's a thirst for the things of righteousness and morality, unlike I think I've ever seen amongst the people. There's an excitement in the places where that is found. This is why people are coming to Jesus all across the nation. 2023, a year of also great revivals. And by the way, we are literally closing down 2023, moving into 2024. And we are seriously have the truck in drive, moving forward, pushing in the direction of Jesus. Why? Because I believe we're thirsty. Where there's not been any water, or people hadn't wanted water, now they find water to be more precious than anything. The living water of the Word of God. We'll talk about more of that in a few moments. You've been listening to Grounded. I'm your host, Scott Cates. We're about to move into hour 2 in just a second. You're going to see it. It'll look like this. If I've sent you a link, you can click on that link. And once you get onto that link, you can click on to see all episodes. And you can look at see all episodes. And when you click into that, you'll see season 2, episode 1, which is what you've just listened to. The second hour will be season 2, episode 2. It'll be titled The 3-Hour Tour. This is part 1. The next will be part 2. You can find that by clicking on the link that I've sent you. Or if you're listening right now and have no idea, if you're listening on iHeartRadio, you can click on the link that says see all episodes if you can't find that. Or on Spotify, you can see all episodes. Or if you're on Buzzsprout, you can see all episodes as well. Most of the podcasts into Google Podcasts, whatever you're listening to. I'm not on Apple, but I'm on everything else. And so as a result of that, you can look at see all podcasts, and it might just play into the next one. If it does not, get on there, click on to season 2, episode 2 for the next hour on this New Year's Day. And that's where we're headed here on this New Year's Day. Into this next hour. By the way, if you do not know Jesus as Savior today, He is the greatest gift ever given to mankind. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised Him from the dead, you will be saved. Ask Jesus for forgiveness of your sins today and welcome Him into your life to be Lord of your life today. Now, let's move into hour 2. And as we do, I'm looking forward to seeing you in just a few seconds as you find it. If you have trouble on this at all, just Google it, look it up on the internet, Grounded with Scott Cates. You can look up Grounded with Scott Cates and find me anywhere, and then just go all the way down to season 2, episode 2, and you can find me and listen to me on pretty much whatever comes up there as well. So hopefully you can find me the next hour as we move into hour 2 on this beautiful New Year's Day. Looking forward to talking to you in just a minute. We'll be back in a moment.